The privileged halls of Jefferson Academy hold two dangerous assumptions: that a black child must be lying about his Pentagon father, and that elite schools are beyond the reach of national threats. Both illusions shatter on Parents' Day. As Ms. Anderson's condescending smile freezes on her face, Jonathan Carter enters the classroom, not as the janitor or clerk they imagined, but as the strategic mind that safeguards a nation. His son Malik watches silently, vindication eclipsed by dawning fear. Because his father isn't just there to prove a point, he's there to neutralize the breach that followed him into a school where no one believed the truth until it walked through the door wearing a security clearance higher than their imagination could reach. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Malik Carter struggled to keep his hands from shaking. As he adjusted his tie in the mirror, the dark blue fabric felt too tight around his neck like it was choking him. Every morning was the same ritual: wake up, put on the Jefferson Academy uniform, and prepare for another day of not quite fitting in. "Malik, breakfast is ready," his father's voice called from downstairs. "Coming, Dad," Malik replied, taking one last look at his reflection. At 10 years old, he was already learning how to wear two faces: the confident one he showed his parents, and the cautious one he needed at school. Downstairs, Jonathan Carter sat at the kitchen table reading something on his tablet. His father always looked impressive, even in casual clothes. There was something about the way he carried himself: straight-backed, alert, eyes that missed nothing. "Got everything ready for today?" Jonathan asked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast across the table. Malik nodded, sitting down to eat. "Yeah, Ms. Anderson assigned us to talk about our parents' jobs today." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "I'm going to tell them about your work at the Pentagon," Malik said, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. His father gave him a measured look. "Just remember what I always tell you." I know, Malik interrupted with a smile. "Some things are safer if you don't say too much." "Smart boy," Jonathan said, ruffling Malik's short hair. "Now eat up. We've got to leave in 10 minutes. Jefferson Academy stood like a fortress of brick and privilege in one of Washington, D.C.'s most affluent neighborhoods. The school had educated the children of politicians, diplomats, and business leaders for generations. Its high iron gates and manicured lawns screamed exclusivity. Malik climbed out of his father's modest sedan, immediately spotting the line of luxury cars dropping off his classmates. He straightened his shoulders, grabbed his backpack, and gave his dad a quick wave. "Have a good day," Jonathan called. "Remember what I said." "Got it, Dad," Malik replied, turning toward the imposing building. As he walked through the halls, Malik felt the familiar feeling of being watched, not with outright hostility, but with something almost worse: curiosity tinged with doubt, as if his very presence there was a question mark. "Malik!" A friendly voice broke through his thoughts. Ethan Williams jogged up beside him, his red hair disheveled as always. "Ready for Ms. Anderson's class?" Malik grinned at his best friend. Unlike most of the kids at Jefferson, Ethan never made him feel like an outsider. "I guess. Are you talking about your dad's job today?" Ethan's smile faltered slightly. "Yeah. Not much to say, though. Dad's still at the factory, same as always." They walked into Ms. Anderson's classroom together, taking their usual seats near the back. The room was already buzzing with excitement as students compared notes on their presentations. "My dad just closed a merger worth $50 million, bragged Tyler Whitman, a blonde boy whose father owned half the real estate in Northern Virginia. "Well, my mom met with 3 senators yesterday," countered Sophia Green, not to be outdone. Ms. Anderson swept into the room exactly as the bell rang. She was tall and elegant, with honey blonde hair swept into a perfect bun and clothes that screamed designer labels. At 45, she was considered one of Jefferson's most respected teachers, a 20-year veteran who had taught the children of 2 former presidents. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone teacher's perfect, warm on the surface but with steel underneath. I trust you're all prepared for today's presentations? Her gaze swept the room, lingering a moment longer on Malik and Ethan than the others. Malik had noticed this before, how Ms. Anderson seemed to expect less from them. With other students, she pushed and challenged. With Malik, her voice often took on a patronizing tone, as if she were speaking to someone much younger. We'll go, in alphabetical order by last name, Ms. Anderson announced, consulting her tablet. Carter, that means you're first. Malik's stomach dropped. He hadn't expected to go first. Taking a deep breath, he made his way to the front of the classroom, 24 pairs of eyes following his every move. My name is Malik Carter, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. My presentation is about my dad's job. Speak up, Malik, Ms. Anderson instructed, her tone suggesting she'd already found his performance lacking. Malik cleared his throat and continued, louder this time. My dad's name is Jonathan Carter, and he works at the Pentagon. The room fell silent for a split second before a snicker broke out from Tyler's corner. It spread like wildfire until half the class was giggling behind their hands. Ms. Anderson didn't silence them. Instead, a smug smile played at her lips. The Pentagon, Malik? Really? Malik nodded, confused by the response. Yes, ma'am. He's worked there for 8 years. Oh my, Ms. Anderson said with exaggerated interest. And what does he do there? Is he the president too? She turned toward the class with a theatrical wink that sent them into another fit of laughter. Malik felt heat rising in his cheeks. No, ma'am. He works in security operations. I'm sure he does. Ms. Anderson interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps next time we can stick to the truth rather than trying to impress everyone. Malik stood frozen at the front of the room. But I am telling the truth, he insisted, his voice growing smaller. You may sit down now, Malik, Ms. Anderson said firmly. We have a lot of presentations to get through today. As Malik returned to his seat, his legs felt like lead. The sniggering continued around him, and he could hear Tyler whispering, Pentagon. Yeah, right. Probably the janitor. From beside him, Ethan's hand shot up. Ms. Anderson, Malik isn't lying. I've seen his dad's ID badge. Ms. Anderson's smile tightened. That's enough, Ethan. Unless you'd like to join Malik in detention for disrupting class. Ethan's face reddened, but he fell silent, shooting Malik an apologetic look. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Malik moved through his classes mechanically, the humiliation of the morning weighing on him like a physical burden. By the time the final bell rang, all he wanted was to go home and forget this day had ever happened. Jonathan was waiting in the car when Malik emerged from school. One look at his son's face told him everything he needed to know. Rough day? He asked as Malik slid into the passenger seat. Yeah, Malik mumbled, staring out the window. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Jonathan spoke again. Want to talk about it? Malik hesitated. Then the words spilled out. We had to talk about our parents' jobs today. I told them you work at the Pentagon, and everyone laughed at me. Even Ms. Anderson. She acted like I was making it up to sound important. Jonathan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, but his voice remained calm. I see. She made me look like a liar in front of everyone, Malik continued, his voice cracking. Why didn't you ever come to career day? Then maybe they'd believe me. You know why, Malik, Jonathan replied. My schedule doesn't always allow for those things. It's not fair, Malik said. Everyone else's parents come to school stuff. Jonathan pulled the car into their driveway before turning to face his son. People doubt what they don't understand, Malik. Sometimes being underestimated can be an advantage. How is being called a liar an advantage? Malik asked bitterly. Before Jonathan could answer, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and Malik saw his father's expression change instantly, becoming harder, more focused. I need to take this, Jonathan said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. Go inside and start your homework. We'll talk more later. Malik grabbed his backpack and trudged into the house while his father remained in the car. Through the living room window, he could see Jonathan speaking intently into his phone. his free hand making sharp, decisive gestures. Later that evening, as Malik finished his math homework at the kitchen table, he heard his father's voice from the study. The door was ajar, and Jonathan's words drifted out, tense and hushed. "I understand the implications. No, that's not acceptable. We need to address this immediately." Curious, Malik crept closer to the study door. His father rarely brought work home, and when he did, he usually kept his office door firmly closed. "I'll handle it personally," Jonathan was saying. "Yes, first thing tomorrow." Malik quickly retreated as he heard his father ending the call. A moment later, Jonathan emerged from the study, his face grave until he spotted Malik. Then, like flipping a switch, his expression softened. "Finished with your homework?" he asked. "Almost," Malik replied. "Is everything okay?" Jonathan nodded. "Just some work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." Later that night, unable to sleep, Malik got up for a glass of water. As he passed by his bedroom window, a movement outside caught his eye. Looking down at the street, he saw a black SUV parked across from their house, its engine running. Malik watched as a man in a dark suit got out, spoke briefly into what looked like a radio on his wrist, then scanned the surrounding area before returning to the vehicle. Confused and a little frightened, Malik went to his father's room and knocked softly. "Dad, there's a car outside. I think someone's watching our house." Jonathan, who seemed to be still awake despite the late hour, came to the window and looked out. His face betrayed no surprise. "Don't worry about it," he said, placing a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder. "Go back to bed." "But who are they? Why are they outside our house?" "Malik," Jonathan said firmly, "some things are safer if you don't know. Trust me on this. Now go to sleep." Reluctantly, Malik returned to his room, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying the day's humiliation, his father's mysterious phone call, and the black SUV keeping silent vigil outside their home. Morning arrived with the insistent beeping of Malik's alarm clock. For a moment, he hoped yesterday had been just a bad dream, but the memory of Ms. Anderson's mocking smile quickly crushed that hope. Downstairs, he found a note from his father on the kitchen counter. "Had to leave early. Mrs. Thompson will drive you to school. Have a good day, Dad." It wasn't unusual for his father to leave before dawn, but today it felt like one more disappointment. Malik had hoped to talk more about what had happened at school, maybe even convince his dad to speak with Ms. Anderson. Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor who sometimes helped out when Jonathan had early meetings, arrived precisely at 7:30. She drove Malik to school in her ancient Volvo, chatting about her garden and her grandchildren while Malik stared out the window, barely listening. "Your father works too hard," she commented as they pulled up to Jefferson Academy. "Important job, though. The country needs good men like him." Malik perked up at this. "You know what my dad does?" Mrs. Thompson smiled mysteriously. "I've lived next door to you for 6 years, child. I notice things." Before Malik could ask more questions, they had arrived at school, and the moment was lost. Miles away, Jonathan Carter sat in a classified meeting room deep within the Pentagon. Unlike the modest attire he wore at home, here he was dressed in a sharply tailored suit with his security badge prominently displayed. Around the table sat 6 other people, 3 military officers and 3 civilians in suits as expensive as his own. The cyber attack was sophisticated, a woman with short gray hair was saying. They targeted multiple systems simultaneously, but we believe their primary goal was access to the SCADA networks. "Any idea who's behind it?" asked a Marine colonel. "To Jonathan's right. Not definitively," the woman replied. "But the code signatures match previous attacks attributed to—" She was interrupted by an aide hurrying into the room. The young man leaned down to whisper something to Jonathan, whose expression immediately darkened. "When did this happen?" Jonathan asked sharply. "Just now, sir. The system flagged it because of your personal security protocols." Jonathan stood, abruptly. "I need to step out. There's been an unauthorized attempt to access Jefferson Academy's database." The others at the table exchanged confused glances. "Jefferson Academy?" the Marine colonel repeated. "The private school?" My son attends there, Jonathan said tersely, and someone just tried to breach their security system using the same methodology as the attacks we've been tracking. Back at Jefferson Academy, Malik was trying to make himself invisible in Ms. Anderson's class. After yesterday's humiliation, the last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself. Ms. Anderson was reviewing their presentations, lavishing praise on certain students while offering only cursory acknowledgments to others. Tyler, your father's work in real estate development is truly shaping our city's future, she gushed. And Sophia, how fascinating that your mother is involved in crafting healthcare policy at such a high level. When she reached Malik's presentation, her lips curved into a patronizing smile. Malik, while imagination is certainly a valuable quality, remember that these presentations were meant to be factual. Several students snickered, and Malik sank lower in his seat. From across the room, Ethan shot him a sympathetic look. After class, as they headed to lunch, Ethan tried to cheer him up. Don't listen to her, Malik. She's always picking favorites. Easy for you to say, Malik muttered. She doesn't call you a liar in front of everyone. Ethan fell silent for a moment. My dad lost his job yesterday, he finally said, his voice small. The factory's closing down. Mom says we might have to move if he can't find something else. Soon. Malik immediately felt ashamed of his self-pity. I'm sorry, Ethan. That's terrible. Ethan shrugged, trying to look braver than he felt. It's fine. We'll figure it out. As they entered the cafeteria, Malik happened to glance out the window. A woman in a trench coat stood across the street, seemingly watching the school. There was something about her stance, alert, vigilant, that reminded him of his father. Who's that? He asked, pointing. Ethan squinted through the glass. Dunno. Probably just waiting for someone. But as Malik continued to watch, the woman raised what looked like a small camera and took several photos of the school building before walking away with purposeful strides. That afternoon, as Jonathan drove him home from school, Malik found himself studying his father with new curiosity. There were things about Jonathan that had always seemed ordinary. His modest clothes, his quiet demeanor, the way he never boasted about himself. But other things suddenly stood out as unusual. The late-night phone calls, the black SUVs, the way he carefully checked their surroundings when they were in public places. Dad? Malik ventured. What exactly do you do at the Pentagon? Jonathan's eyes remained fixed on the road. You know I work in security operations. But what does that mean? What do you actually do every day? A slight smile crossed Jonathan's face. Lots of meetings, lots of reports, not very exciting stuff. Then why are there people watching our house sometimes? Malik pressed. Jonathan's smile faded. What makes you think someone's watching our house? I saw them last night, and sometimes there are cars parked across the street with people just sitting in them. They never get out. After a long pause, Jonathan said, Some things are safer if you don't know too much about them, Malik. That's not just me trying to avoid your questions. It's the truth. But why would it be dangerous for me to know what you do? Malik persisted. I didn't say dangerous, Jonathan corrected gently. I said safer. There's a difference. Before Malik could ask another question, his school tablet sitting on his lap suddenly lit up with an alert. A string of random characters flashed across the screen, then disappeared as quickly as it had come. What was that? Jonathan asked sharply, having glimpsed the strange text. I don't know, Malik said, bewildered. Some weird message just popped up and then vanished. Jonathan's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Let me see your tablet when we get home. Once they arrived, Jonathan spent nearly an hour examining Malik's tablet, running what looked like diagnostic programs from his own laptop. Finally, he handed the device back. Everything seems normal now, he said, though the crease between his eyebrows suggested otherwise. But Malik, listen to me carefully. If anything unusual happens at school, anything at all, I want you to call me immediately. Understand? Malik nodded, increasingly confused by his father's intensity. Is something wrong, Dad? Jonathan rested, his hands on Malik's shoulders, looking him directly in the eyes. Probably not. But I'd rather be overly cautious than not cautious enough. The next day at school, Miss Anderson seemed determined to continue Malik's humiliation. As they discussed famous government buildings in Washington, D.C., she pointedly called on him when they reached the Pentagon. "Malik, since your father supposedly works there," she said with a smirk, "perhaps you can tell us something about the Pentagon that isn't in our textbooks?" The class went quiet, most students grinning in anticipation of another embarrassing moment. But Malik had spent the evening reading everything he could find about the Pentagon, determined not to be caught off guard again. "The Pentagon has twice as many bathrooms as necessary," he said confidently. "It was built in the 1940s when Virginia was still segregated, so they had to have separate bathrooms for white and black employees. After segregation ended, they just kept all the bathrooms." Ms. Anderson's smirk faltered slightly. She clearly hadn't expected him to have an actual answer. "Well," she said after a moment, "that's correct, though hardly relevant to our discussion of architectural significance. And it has a hot dog stand in the central courtyard that Soviet missiles supposedly targeted during the Cold War," Malik continued, warming to his subject. "They thought it was the entrance to a secret bunker because they saw high-ranking officials going there every day, but they were just getting lunch." A few students laughed, not mockingly this time, but genuinely amused by the anecdote. Ms. Anderson's lips thinned. "That's enough, Malik. We need to move on." But the small victory gave Malik a boost of confidence that lasted throughout the day. As the final bell rang, Ms. Anderson called him back as the other students filed out. "Malik," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold, "I understand you're going through a phase where you feel the need to embellish the truth. Many children do. But continuing to insist on these Pentagon stories is becoming disruptive, me." "Not making anything up," Malik said firmly. Ms. Anderson leaned forward, her smile never reaching her eyes. "If your father really works at the Pentagon, why not bring him in to prove it? Parents' Day is next week. That would settle everything, wouldn't it?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. She was certain he would back down, admit to lying, or make excuses why his father couldn't attend. Instead, Malik met her gaze steadily. "Fine, he will." For a split second, uncertainty flickered across Ms. Anderson's face, but she quickly masked it with a patronizing smile. "Wonderful. I look forward to meeting him." That evening, Malik approached his father with nervous determination. Jonathan was at the kitchen table, laptop open, frowning at something on the screen. "Dad?" Malik began hesitantly. "There's Parents' Day at school next week. I really need you to come." Jonathan looked up, his expression distracted. "Parents' Day? You know how difficult it is for me to commit to school events, Malik." "I know, but..." Malik took a deep breath and explained the situation. Ms. Anderson's continued mockery, her challenge, the way she'd made him a laughingstock among his classmates. As Malik spoke, Jonathan's expression gradually shifted from distracted to focused, then to something harder to read. By the time Malik finished, his father's face had settled into a calm determination that Malik recognized from rare occasions, when Jonathan was truly angry but controlling it. "I see," Jonathan said simply. He closed his laptop. "What day is this Parents' Day?" "Next Friday," Malik said hopefully. "Will you come?" Jonathan nodded once, decisively. "Yes, I'll be there." "Really?" Malik couldn't hide his surprise. His father had never agreed so quickly to a school event before. "Really," Jonathan confirmed. "I think it's time I met your teacher." Malik felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Finally, Ms. Anderson would see the truth. Later that night, Jonathan made another of his mysterious phone calls from his study. This time, Malik was certain he heard his father mention Jefferson Academy and security protocols before the study door closed completely. Outside, the black SUV was back, parked in the same spot as before. But now, instead of feeling frightened by its presence, Malik found it oddly reassuring. Something was happening. Something his father wasn't telling him about. But whatever it was, he was beginning to believe it might work in his favor. As he drifted off to sleep, Malik thought about the look on Ms. Anderson's face when his father walked into that classroom. For the first time since the humiliating presentation, He found himself looking forward to going to school. The days leading up to Parents' Day crawled by with agonizing slowness. In class, Ms. Anderson had been wearing a particularly smug smile whenever she glanced at Malik. Twice she had made offhand comments about tall tales and vivid imaginations while looking directly at him. "She thinks your dad isn't coming," Ethan whispered during their Thursday math lesson. "He'll be there," Malik replied with more confidence than he felt. Though his father had promised to attend, Malik knew how unpredictable Jonathan's schedule could be. Just last month, he had missed Malik's science fair because of some emergency at work. That evening at dinner, Malik picked at his food nervously. "You're still coming tomorrow, right?" Jonathan looked up from his plate. "I said I would be there, didn't I?" "Yeah, but sometimes things come up at work." "Not tomorrow," Jonathan said firmly. "I've already cleared my schedule." Malik nodded, relieved. "Ms. Anderson doesn't believe you work at the Pentagon. She thinks I made it all up." Something flashed in Jonathan's eyes, a hardness Malik rarely saw at home. "Does she now?" "She's been making fun of me for it," Malik continued. "In front of everyone." Jonathan set down his fork with deliberate calm. "Tell me more about Ms. Anderson." Malik described his teacher, her favoritism toward the wealthy students, her subtle put-downs, the way she seemed to enjoy humiliating him. Jonathan listened without interruption, his expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. When Malik finished, he simply said, "I see." Later that night, Malik noticed his father in his home office, the door partially open. Jonathan was on his laptop, but instead of financial spreadsheets or news sites, Malik glimpsed what looked like personnel files on the screen. He caught a brief look at Ms. Anderson's photograph before Jonathan noticed him and closed the laptop. "Shouldn't you be in bed?" his father asked, not unkindly. "Just getting some water," Malik replied, wondering what his father had been looking at and why. The next morning, Malik woke to find his father already dressed. Not in his usual work attire, but in a crisply pressed dark suit with a blue tie. That seemed more formal than his everyday clothes. On the kitchen counter lay a leather portfolio and an ID badge Malik had never seen before. "Is that your Pentagon ID?" Malik asked, reaching for it. Jonathan gently moved it out of reach. "Yes, and it stays with me." Malik noticed his father checking his watch repeatedly during breakfast, as if coordinating the timing of their departure, with precision. When they finally got into the car, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then made a brief call. "We're leaving now. ETA 20 minutes. They rode in silence for several blocks before Malik gathered the courage to ask, "Dad, are you okay? You seem different today." Jonathan's expression softened. "I'm fine, Malik. Just focused." "Are you mad about Ms. Anderson?" "Not mad," Jonathan replied after a moment's consideration. "But I don't appreciate anyone calling my son a liar." As they approached Jefferson Academy, Malik noticed something unusual. 3 black SUVs, identical to the one he'd seen outside their house, were parked across the street from the school. Men in dark suits stood beside them wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy morning. "Dad, who are those men?" Jonathan glanced at them briefly. "Colleagues." "Why are they here?" "Support," Jonathan said simply, pulling into the school's visitor parking lot. As they walked toward the entrance, Malik felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Part of him couldn't wait to see Ms. Anderson's face when his father walked in. Another part worried that somehow, something would go wrong. "Don't worry," Jonathan said as if reading his thoughts. "Everything will be fine." Inside, the school hallways were bustling with parents and students. Parents' Day at Jefferson Academy was always a major event, with many families using it as an opportunity to network and forge connections. Malik spotted Tyler's father, in an expensive Italian suit, already deep in conversation with the father of another student. They checked in at the front desk, where the secretary did a double-take. When she saw Jonathan's ID badge, "Mr. Carter," she said, her professional smile faltering slightly. "We weren't expecting. It's lovely to have you join us today." "Thank you," Jonathan replied politely. "Could you direct us to Ms. Anderson's classroom?" Of course. Room 112, just down that hallway on the right. As they walked, Malik noticed other parents and staff giving them curious glances. Jonathan's badge, prominently displayed on his suit jacket, seemed to be attracting attention. "Why is everyone staring?" Malik whispered. "People are curious about things they don't see every day," Jonathan answered. They reached room 112, where a small crowd of parents and students had already gathered. Ms. Anderson stood at the front, perfectly poised in a cream-colored blouse and navy skirt, greeting each family with practiced charm. When she spotted Malik, a satisfied smirk crossed her face, clearly assuming he had come alone. Then her eyes shifted to Jonathan, took in his immaculate suit, his commanding presence, and finally settled on the Pentagon badge displayed on his lapel. The smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of disbelief. "Ms. Anderson," Malik said, unable to keep a note of triumph from his voice. "This is my dad, Jonathan Carter. He works at the Pentagon." Jonathan extended his hand. "Ms. Anderson, I've heard so much about you." She took his hand automatically, her face pale. "Mr. Carter, welcome to Jefferson Academy." "Thank you," Jonathan replied smoothly. "Malik has told me about your interest in his presentations about my work." Ms. Anderson's composure, usually unshakable, visibly crumbled. "Yes, well, the children sometimes have such creative interpretations of their parents' careers." "Indeed," Jonathan agreed, though in this case I can assure you Malik was quite accurate. Before Ms. Anderson could respond, the classroom door opened again, and a man in a dark suit stepped in. He scanned the room, spotted Jonathan, and approached with urgent purpose. "Sir," he said quietly, "there's something that requires your attention." Jonathan nodded, then turned back to Ms. Anderson. "You'll have to excuse me for a moment. Government, business." He stepped outside with the man, leaving Malik standing proudly beside a thoroughly discomfited Ms. Anderson. "Well," she said, attempting to regain control of the situation, "shall we begin our Parents' Day activities?" For the next half hour, Ms. Anderson led the class through presentations and discussions, though her usual confidence was noticeably diminished. She kept glancing nervously at the door, where Jonathan stood in deep conversation with not one, but now 3 men in suits. Throughout the classroom, parents and students whispered among themselves, occasional glances thrown Malik's way. For once, he wasn't being ignored or mocked. He was the center of fascinated attention. "Dude," Ethan whispered, leaning over from his desk, "your dad really does work at the Pentagon." "I told you," Malik replied, unable to suppress a grin. Their conversation was interrupted by the classroom door opening once more. This time, it was Principal Hayes who entered, looking flustered. He scanned the room, his eyes settling on Ms. Anderson. "Ah, Ms. Anderson," he said with forced cheerfulness. "I see you've met Mr. Carter." "Yes," she replied stiffly. "We were just discussing—" "Excellent. Excellent," the principal interrupted, clearly agitated. He turned to address the class. "Students, we're going to have a special presentation today. Mr. Carter has graciously agreed to speak to us about his work with the government." Ms. Anderson's face registered shock. Clearly, this deviation from her carefully planned Parents' Day schedule had not been discussed with her. Principal Hayes ushered Jonathan to the front of the classroom. "Mr. Carter is a senior security strategist at the Pentagon," he announced, emphasizing each word as if to drive home the point to Ms. Anderson. "We're very honored to have him visit Jefferson Academy today." Jonathan took his place at the front of the room with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to speaking before much more intimidating audiences. The classroom fell silent, every eye fixed on him. "Thank you, Principal Hayes," Jonathan began. "Before I start, I want to say how proud I am of my son, Malik. He's shown remarkable resilience and character in situations that would challenge most adults." Malik felt his chest swell with pride as his father's gaze briefly met his. "Now, I can't discuss the specifics of my work for obvious reasons," Jonathan continued. "But I can tell you a bit about what we do at the Pentagon. Contrary to what you might have seen in movies, most of our work involves planning, analysis, and prevention. Every day, Dedicated professionals work to identify and neutralize threats before they become dangers. As Jonathan spoke, Malik noticed Ms. Anderson inching toward the back of the classroom, clearly trying to make herself less conspicuous. "One thing I've learned in my career," Jonathan said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room, "is that prejudice, prejudging situations or people based on assumptions rather than facts, is one of the greatest barriers to effective security. When we dismiss information because it doesn't fit our preconceptions, we create blind spots, and blind spots are dangerous." Several parents shifted uncomfortably, and Ms. Anderson's face flushed red. It was clear to everyone that Jonathan's words carried a message beyond national security. "You don't always see the people protecting you," Jonathan continued. "But that doesn't mean they're not there. The most effective protection often happens without anyone realizing it was needed in the first place." A student raised his hand. Tyler, the boy who had laughed loudest at Malik's presentation. "Yes?" Jonathan acknowledged him. "Sir, have you ever been in a gunfight?" Tyler asked, his tone caught between awe and skepticism. A slight smile crossed Jonathan's face. "As I said, our goal is to resolve situations before they reach that point. But yes, I've had to face dangerous situations. The key is preparation, teamwork, and—" Jonathan stopped mid-sentence as his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it discreetly, his expression instantly shifting from relaxed to alert. To most in the room, the change might have been imperceptible, but Malik recognized it immediately. It was the same look his father got when those late-night emergency calls came in. Jonathan smoothly redirected, "The key is preparation, teamwork, and constant vigilance. Speaking of which, I should check in with my team. Principal Hayes, could I have a word outside?" The principal nodded, clearly surprised by the sudden interruption, but unwilling to question someone of Jonathan's authority. As Jonathan stepped outside with Principal Hayes, the classroom erupted in excited chatter. "Your dad is so cool," Ethan whispered to Malik. "Did you see Ms. Anderson's face when he started talking about prejudice?" Malik nodded, though his attention was focused on his father through the classroom window. Jonathan was showing something on his phone to Principal Hayes, whose expression had grown increasingly grave. Ms. Anderson, attempting to regain control of her classroom, clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, let's continue with our scheduled activities. Parents, if you could join your children at their desks for our next project." But her authority had been severely undermined. Parents and students alike kept glancing toward the door, waiting for Jonathan's return. After several minutes, Principal Hayes re-entered alone, his face tense. He whispered something to Ms. Anderson, whose eyes widened in alarm. "Class," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "We're going to take a short break. Please remain in the classroom until further notice." "What's happening?" Malik asked Ethan, a sense of unease growing in his stomach. "No idea," Ethan replied. "But your dad looked pretty serious." Jonathan Carter stood in the hallway outside the classroom, his government-issued phone displaying an alert that made his blood run cold. "Breach detected. Jefferson Academy." "How long ago?" he asked the agent who had delivered the initial warning. "Minutes, sir. The cyber team detected it during routine monitoring. They flagged it immediately because of your security protocols regarding this location." Jonathan nodded grimly. He had indeed placed special monitoring on the school's systems, after the previous attempts to breach them, a precaution that now seemed prescient. "What's the nature of the breach?" "Multiple entry points, sir. They hit the security cameras first, then the door locking mechanisms. It has all the hallmarks of the group we've been tracking." Jonathan's jaw tightened. For months, his team had been monitoring a sophisticated foreign intelligence cell operating on American soil. Their usual targets were defense contractors and government facilities, not private schools. The fact that they had suddenly shifted focus to Jefferson Academy couldn't be coincidence. "Get me Agent Ramirez," he ordered, "and implement Security Protocol Omega for this building." As the agent hurried to comply, Principal Hayes approached, his face a mask of poorly concealed panic. "Mr. Carter, what exactly is happening? Should we evacuate the building?" "No," Jonathan replied firmly. "For now, everyone stays put. I need you to initiate a soft lockdown. Keep all students and staff in their current locations, doors closed but not barricaded. Make it sound routine, like a drill. Can you do that? The principal nodded uncertainly. Yes, but... Good. Do it now, please. As Hayes hurried toward the main office, Jonathan saw a familiar figure entering the school's main doors. FBI agent Maria Ramirez, the mysterious woman in the trench coat Malik had spotted watching the school days earlier. Carter, she greeted, him with a curt nod. Quite a coincidence you being here today. I don't believe in coincidences, Jonathan replied, especially not when my son's school is targeted by the same group we've been tracking for months. Ramirez's expression hardened. We have reason to believe there's a threat inside this building. The cyber intrusion is likely just the first step. Your people in position? She nodded. Perimeter is secure. We've got teams covering all exits. Good. Jonathan's response was cut short by the school's PA system crackling to life. Attention all students and staff, Principal Hayes' voice announced, remarkably steady considering the circumstances. We are initiating a precautionary lockdown procedure. Please remain in your current locations with doors closed until further notice. This is not a drill, but there is no cause for alarm. No cause for alarm, Ramirez muttered. That always works. Jonathan was already moving back toward Ms. Anderson's classroom. I need to get back to my son. Inside the classroom, the announcement had generated precisely the kind of nervous tension Hayes had hoped to avoid. Parents were checking their phones, students were whispering among themselves, and Ms. Anderson stood frozen at the front of the room, clearly unsure how to proceed. Jonathan entered and immediately took control of the situation. Everyone, please, remain calm. This is a standard security precaution. What's happening, Mr. Carter? One of the parents demanded. Are our children in danger? Right now, the best thing everyone can do is stay calm and follow instructions, Jonathan replied, evenly. Ms. Anderson, please make sure all blinds are closed and the door is locked. The teacher moved to comply, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the blinds. Jonathan noticed Tyler's father, Mr. Whitman, watching him suspiciously. Is this related to your presence here today? Whitman asked accusingly. Have you brought some sort of threat to our children? Before Jonathan could respond, Ms. Anderson surprisingly came to his defense. Mr. Whitman, please. Mr. Carter is clearly helping to ensure our safety. Jonathan gave her a brief nod of thanks before addressing the room. I understand everyone's concern. Please trust that we have security personnel throughout the building. The lockdown is precautionary. He moved to where Malik and Ethan sat, their faces showing a mixture of fear and excitement. Dad, what's really happening? Malik whispered. Just a security concern we're addressing, Jonathan replied quietly. I need you to help keep everyone calm, okay? Malik nodded, recognizing the seriousness in his father's tone. Is it because of your work? Before Jonathan could answer, his phone vibrated again. The message was brief but alarming. Suspicious package found in basement. EOD team en route. I need to step out again, Jonathan told Malik. Stay here. Don't leave this room for any reason. As Jonathan moved toward the door, Ms. Anderson approached him. Mr. Carter, she said softly, her earlier smugness entirely gone. Should I be worried? Just keep everyone in this room, he replied. I'll be back as soon as I can. Outside in the hallway, Jonathan found Agent Ramirez waiting for him, accompanied by 2 FBI agents in tactical gear. EOD team is 10 minutes out, she reported. Building services found a package near the main electrical controls. They say it has wires visible. Show me, Jonathan said. They moved swiftly through the eerily quiet hallways, descending a service stairwell to the school's basement. 2 more agents were already there, keeping a safe distance from a backpack propped against the wall near the electrical panel. No one's touched it? Jonathan asked. Negative. Building services supervisor spotted it during his security sweep, called it in immediately. Jonathan approached cautiously, studying the backpack without touching it. The partially unzipped top revealed what looked like circuit boards and wiring. This isn't a bomb, he said after a moment. It's a surveillance package. High-end military grade. Someone's been monitoring this building's systems from the inside. Ramirez frowned. Why would foreign operatives be interested in a private school? That's what we need to find out, Jonathan replied. He turned to one of the agents. Get me the school's personnel files, everyone who has access to this area, and I want security footage from the past week. Sir, the agent replied. The school's security system has been compromised. We don't know if the footage is intact. Then get me the backup tapes. A place like this will have physical backups. As the agents hurried to comply, Jonathan's phone buzzed with another message. This one sent a chill down his spine. Facial recognition match on school maintenance staff. Known foreign operative. Last seen near East Wing 5 minutes ago. Jonathan showed the message to Ramirez, whose expression darkened. The East Wing. That's where the server room is located. And where they keep student and family information, Jonathan added grimly. This isn't random. They're after something specific. Or someone, Ramirez suggested. The implication hung in the air between them. Jonathan's position at the Pentagon gave him access to some of the nation's most sensitive security information. A foreign intelligence operation targeting his son's school on the very day of his visit couldn't be coincidence. We need to lock down the server room, Jonathan decided, and I want all maintenance staff accounted for immediately. As they headed toward the East Wing, Principal Hayes intercepted them, his earlier composure now completely gone. Mr. Carter, parents are getting agitated. They're demanding answers. Some are threatening to leave with their children despite the lockdown. Tell them that doing so could put everyone at risk, Jonathan replied firmly. This is a matter of national security. Now, Mr. Hayes, the principal's eyes widened. National security? At a school? I need your cooperation, not your questions, Jonathan said. Keep everyone where they are. We'll handle this. As Hayes reluctantly departed, Agent Ramirez received an update through her earpiece. We've got a problem, she reported. The maintenance worker identified as a foreign operative. He's not in the East Wing. According to building services, he should be doing rounds in the West Wing right now. Jonathan felt his blood run cold. The classrooms are in the West Wing, including your son's, Ramirez confirmed. Without another word, they both began running toward Ms. Anderson's classroom. As they rounded the corner, Jonathan saw a man in a gray maintenance uniform outside room 112, fiddling with what appeared to be a key card reader next to the door. FBI, don't move, Ramirez shouted, drawing her. Weapon, the man's head snapped up. For a split second, his eyes met Jonathan's, cold, calculating eyes that Jonathan instantly recognized as those of a trained operative. Then he bolted, running down the hallway away from them. Stay with the classroom, Jonathan called to Ramirez, as he took off after the man. The chase led through the winding hallways of Jefferson Academy, past startled teachers who had peeked out of their rooms despite the lockdown orders. The operative was fast and clearly knew the building's layout, taking turns and shortcuts that suggested detailed planning. Jonathan followed him down another stairwell, into a service corridor that led toward the cafeteria. As they burst into the large empty dining area, the man suddenly whirled around, a knife appearing in his hand. You should have stayed out of this, Carter, he said in heavily accented English. Who sent you? Jonathan demanded, keeping a safe distance, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance. The man smirked. You know who, the same people who've been watching your every move for months. Did you really think your son would be safe here? A cold fury rose in Jonathan's chest. If anything happens to my son, then you should have been more careful about where you sent him to school, the man interrupted. So many important families, so much valuable data. This place is a goldmine of intelligence. Before Jonathan could respond, the gymnasium doors behind the operative burst open. 2 FBI agents rushed in, weapons drawn. The operative, seeing he was cornered, made a desperate lunge toward Jonathan with his knife. Jonathan sidestepped the attack with the practiced ease of someone with extensive combat training. In one fluid motion, he caught the man's arm, twisted it behind his back and forced him to the ground. It's over, he said as the agents moved in to secure the operative. Tell your handlers they picked the wrong school to target. With the immediate threat neutralized, Jonathan hurried back toward Ms. Anderson's classroom, his mind racing. If this operative had been watching the school, what was his ultimate goal? And more importantly, was he working alone? As he approached room 112, he saw Agent Ramirez outside the door, speaking urgently into her radio. "We've got another problem," she said as Jonathan reached her. "Building security just reported movement in the air ducts near the main office, and there's an unauthorized voice on the school's radio frequency." Jonathan's expression hardened. This was never about data or surveillance. It's a coordinated extraction operation. They're after one of the students. Or multiple students. Ramirez suggested. "Think about it. This school has children of diplomats, government officials, defense contractors, including my son," Jonathan finished grimly. "We need to get everyone out of here. Now." Just as he reached for the classroom door, a muffled bang echoed through the building, followed by the immediate wail of fire alarms. Inside the classroom, panic erupted. Parents clutched their children, students cried out in fear, and Ms. Anderson stood helplessly at the front, trying in vain to maintain order. "Everyone stay calm," Jonathan called as he entered. His authoritative voice cut through the chaos, bringing a momentary hush to the room. "We need to evacuate in an orderly fashion. Follow the FBI agents outside to the designated safe area." "What? Was that explosion?" someone demanded. "Likely a diversionary tactic," Jonathan replied honestly. "Which is why we need to move quickly but calmly." As Agent Ramirez began organizing the evacuation, Jonathan moved to Malik's side. "Stay right beside me," he instructed his son. "No matter what happens, don't get separated." Malik nodded, his eyes wide but remarkably steady. "What about Ethan?" Jonathan glanced at Malik's friend, who looked terrified. "He comes with us. Both of you, hold on to my jacket and don't let go." As they joined the line of students and parents being escorted from the classroom, Jonathan noticed Ms. Anderson hanging back, seemingly frozen with indecision. "Ms. Anderson," he called, "come with us. Now." The teacher, startled at his voice, then hurried to join them. "I'm sorry," she whispered as they moved into the hallway. "I didn't believe him. I didn't believe Malik about you." "We'll discuss that later," Jonathan replied curtly. "Right now, focus on getting safely out of this building." The hallway was filling with students and staff from other classrooms, all being directed toward the nearest exits by FBI agents and local police who had responded to the alarm. Through the growing crowd, Jonathan spotted something that made his blood run cold. Another maintenance worker, moving against the flow of evacuees, his hand reaching suspiciously inside his jacket. "Ramirez!" Jonathan called out, pointing toward the suspicious figure. 3 o'clock. The FBI agent reacted instantly, signaling to her team. 2 agents broke off from the evacuation line and moved to intercept the man, who, seeing he'd been spotted, suddenly pulled out what looked like a small remote device. "Everybody down!" Jonathan shouted, pulling Malik and Ethan to the floor and shielding them with his body. Ms. Anderson dropped beside them, covering her head. Instead of an explosion, however, the school's lights suddenly went dark. Emergency yaw. Lighting kicked in seconds later, casting the hallway in an eerie red glow. "Power cut," Jonathan muttered, helping the boys back to their feet. "They're trying to disable the security systems completely." The evacuation continued, more urgent. Now in the dimmed lighting, Jonathan kept a firm grip on Malik and Ethan as they neared the exit, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. They had almost reached the doors when a loud crash came from behind them. Jonathan turned to see the second operative engaged in a struggle with the FBI agents, knocking over a display case in the process. Glass shattered across the floor as students screamed and parents pushed toward the exits in panic. "Keep moving," Jonathan urged, guiding the boys and Ms. Anderson forward. Outside, the school grounds had been transformed into a tactical operations center. Police cars, FBI vehicles, and even military personnel created a secure perimeter around the building. Students and staff were being directed to gathering points where they were checked off against attendance records. Jonathan guided Malik and Ethan to the nearest FBI checkpoint, where Agent Ramirez was coordinating the response. "Status?" Jonathan asked her. "Two operatives in custody, one still unaccounted for," she reported tersely. "We found surveillance equipment in the server room, the principal's office, and 3 classrooms." "Including Ms. Anderson's?" Jonathan asked. Ramirez nodded. "Primary target. They've been monitoring it for at least a week, according to the equipment." Timestamps. Ms. Anderson, who had been standing nearby, gasped audibly. "Monitoring my classroom? Why?" "That's what we intend to find out," Jonathan replied, looking back at the school building where FBI agents were still conducting a thorough sweep. As they stood in the relative safety of the perimeter, Jonathan noticed Malik looking up at him with a mixture of fear, confusion, and a dawning understanding. "This is why you couldn't come to school events before, isn't it?" Malik asked quietly. "This is what you really do." Jonathan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Part of it, yes. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more." "Is this because of your work? Is that why they came here?" Before Jonathan could answer, a suspicious bag was carried out of the building by an FBI evidence team. As they set it down at a safe distance, Jonathan's face darkened with recognition. "That's not just surveillance equipment," he said to Ramirez. "That's a data mining package designed to extract information from secure networks. Military grade." "What would they want from a school network?" Ramirez wondered. Jonathan's expression was grim as the pieces finally came together. They weren't after the school's data. They were using the school's connection to access the home networks of government officials and defense contractors through their children's devices. Tablets, laptops, phones, all connecting to both school and home networks. Creating a backdoor into otherwise secure systems, Ramirez concluded. Clever. Ms. Anderson, who had been listening to this exchange with growing horror, suddenly turned to Malik. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I should have believed you about your father." Malik, still processing the day's events, simply nodded. Jonathan checked his phone as another update came in. "They've apprehended the 3rd operative trying to escape through the service entrance. The building is secure." A collective sigh of relief passed through the gathered parents and staff. As the immediate danger receded, Jonathan found himself the center of attention, with parents approaching to thank him and ask questions. Through it all, he kept Malik close by his side, his hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder. The look they exchanged spoke volumes, a new understanding between father and son, forged in the crucible of this extraordinary day. Principal Hayes, looking considerably more disheveled than he had that morning, approached them. "Mr. Carter, I don't know how to thank you. Your quick action may have saved lives today." "I was just doing my job," Jonathan replied. "But if you want to thank me, you might start by ensuring all students at Jefferson Academy are treated with equal respect, regardless of their background." Hayes nodded earnestly, his gaze flickering briefly to Ms. Anderson, who had the good grace to look ashamed. As the emergency response continued around them, Jonathan knelt down to eye level with Malik. "You did good today," he told his son quietly. "You kept your head. You stayed calm. I'm proud of you." Malik's face brightened at the praise. "Does this mean I can tell the kids at school what you really do now?" Jonathan chuckled, some of the day's tension finally releasing. "Some things are still safer if they stay between us. But I think they've gotten the general idea." Around them, Jefferson Academy would never be quite the same again, and neither would Malik's place within it. As evening descended on Jefferson Academy, the initial chaos had transformed into an organized investigation. Police tape cordoned off sections of the building, and teams of FBI agents methodically combed through classrooms and corridors. The once pristine private school now resembled a crime scene, which Jonathan reflected grimly, was exactly what it had become. Most families had been cleared to leave after giving statements, but Jonathan, Malik, and Ethan remained, along with several government officials whose children attended the school. They sat in the library, which had been designated as a secure area, while agents continued their work throughout the building. "How much longer do we have to stay, Dad?" Malik asked, fatigue evident in his voice. The excitement of the day had worn off, replaced by exhaustion. "Not much longer," Jonathan promised, checking his watch. "Agent Ramirez just needs to finish processing the evidence." As if summoned by her name, Ramirez appeared in the library doorway, her trench coat now replaced by an FBI windbreaker. She beckoned to Jonathan, who squeezed Malik's shoulder reassuringly. Before joining her, "We've completed our initial assessment of the surveillance equipment," she said in a low voice. "It's more sophisticated than we thought. Military grade, with advanced encryption protocols that match what we've seen from the Korev group." Jonathan's expression darkened. The Korev group was a notorious cyber-espionage collective with ties to foreign intelligence services. His team had been tracking their activities for months, but this was the first time they had targeted an American school. "Any idea what their primary objective was?" he asked. "We're still analyzing the data, but it looks like they were gathering intelligence on multiple high-value targets through their children's school accounts, cross-referencing student names with parents in sensitive positions." Jonathan nodded grimly. "And my son? Was he on their list?" Ramirez hesitated, which was answer enough. His name was flagged in their system, along with 7 other students whose parents work in national security. A cold anger settled in Jonathan's chest. They were using children to get to their parents. "It gets worse," Ramirez continued, leading Jonathan to a table where an evidence technician was examining what looked like an ordinary janitor's maintenance cart. "We found this in the boiler room. It's not just cleaning supplies." The technician carefully lifted a false bottom in the cart, revealing a compartment containing handcuffs, zip ties, and a small case of syringes. "Sedatives," Ramirez explained. "Enough to incapacitate several children." They weren't just gathering intelligence, Jonathan realized, his voice hardening. They were planning an abduction. "Leverage," Ramirez agreed. "Take a child, force the parent to cooperate. It's an old playbook, but effective." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "I want security details assigned to all the targeted families, and I want round-the-clock protection for Malik until we've neutralized this threat completely." "Already arranged," Ramirez assured him. "But there's something else you should see." She led him to another table where a laptop displayed security footage from the school. "We retrieved this from the backup servers. Watch the janitor, the one who grabbed your son." Jonathan leaned in, watching as the footage showed Malik following the disguised operative down to the boiler room. His parental instincts flared, with protective anger, but his professional training kept him focused on what Ramirez was showing him. "There," she pointed as the janitor suddenly turned, grabbing Malik. "He recognized your son specifically. This wasn't random. He knew exactly who Malik was." "They've been watching us," Jonathan said, the realization settling like ice in his brain. "Not just at school, at home too. The black SUV Malik spotted outside our house wasn't one of ours," Ramirez confirmed. "We checked the surveillance logs. There was no authorized protection detail on your residence until today." Jonathan's mind raced through the implications. If foreign operatives had been monitoring his home, what else might they know about his work? About the classified operations he'd been involved in? "I need to get Malik home," he said. "And then, I need to check our house for surveillance equipment." "We've already dispatched a team," Ramirez told him. "They're sweeping your residence now." Jonathan nodded his thanks, turning to head back to Malik when Ramirez caught his arm. "Carter," she said, her voice lower. "There's something else. The janitor, O'Reilly or whatever his real name is, he's not talking. But we found this in his locker." She handed him a small photograph, worn at the edges as if it had been handled frequently. It showed a younger Jonathan, in combat fatigues, standing with a group of special operations soldiers in a desert setting. Jonathan recognized the location immediately, a classified mission in Syria 5 years ago. "How did he get this?" Jonathan muttered, more to himself than to Ramirez. "That's what I'd like to know," she replied. "This isn't just about intelligence gathering anymore. This is personal." Jonathan tucked the photo into his pocket, his mind working furiously. Only a handful of people had access to images from that operation. If the Korev group had obtained it, they had a source within the highest levels of U.S. intelligence. "Keep this between us for now," he told Ramirez. "I need to make some calls." Back in the library, Malik and Ethan had dozed off, heads resting on their backpacks. Ms. Anderson sat nearby, looking shell-shocked and out of place among the federal agents. When she saw Jonathan approaching, she stood up nervously. "Mr. Carter," she began. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I want to apologize again for how I treated Malik. I had no idea that my son was telling the truth. Jonathan finished for her, his voice level but with an edge of steel. You didn't believe him because of what exactly? His race? His background? The fact that he doesn't come from old money like most of your students? Ms. Anderson flinched as if slapped. I never meant to. You never meant to be caught, Jonathan corrected her. Let me be clear, Ms. Anderson. Your treatment of my son and others like him ends today. Principal Hayes has already agreed to a full review of Jefferson Academy's inclusivity practices with particular attention to faculty bias. You can't, she began, then stopped herself, realizing the precariousness of her position. I can and I have, Jonathan replied calmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take my son home. He gently woke Malik and Ethan, who blinked groggily back to consciousness. Time to go? Malik asked, rubbing his eyes. Almost, Jonathan replied. Ethan, your parents are on their way. They should be here any minute. As if on cue, an agent appeared at the door. Mr. Carter? The Williams family has arrived for their son. Ethan gathered his things, then turned to Malik. This was the craziest day ever, he said, his voice a mixture of awe and lingering fear. Will you be at school tomorrow? I don't know, Malik replied, looking to his father. We'll see, Jonathan said noncommittally. Let's get through tonight first. After Ethan left with his visibly shaken parents, Jonathan led Malik through the now quiet school corridors. FBI agents nodded respectfully as they passed, and Malik couldn't help noticing how deferential everyone was to his father. The same father Ms. Anderson had mocked him for claiming worked at the Pentagon. Outside, the black SUVs, legitimate, government vehicles this time, waited to escort them home. As they climbed into the back seat of the lead vehicle, Malik finally asked the question that had been building all day. Dad, who were those people? Why were they at my school? Jonathan considered his son's question carefully. The age-old instinct, to protect Malik by keeping him in the dark, warred with the day's stark reality. Ignorance hadn't protected him at all. They were intelligence operatives working for a foreign government, he said finally. They were gathering information, and possibly, he hesitated, then decided Malik deserved the truth. Possibly planning to take some of the students whose parents work in sensitive positions. Like me? Malik asked, his eyes widening. Yes, Jonathan admitted. Like you. Because of what you do at the Pentagon? Jonathan nodded, watching his son carefully for signs of fear. To his surprise, Malik's expression showed more curiosity than terror. So you're not just an analyst, Malik said. It wasn't a question. No, Jonathan confirmed. I lead a counterintelligence unit. We identify and neutralize threats to national security. Is that why we never talk about your work at home? Why you never come to school events? Partly, Jonathan said. My position is classified, and maintaining a low profile helps protect both the operations I oversee and our family. Malik was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he asked, Is Mom okay? Should we call her? Jonathan smiled at his son's concern. She's fine. I spoke with her while you were sleeping. Her conference in Chicago is secure, and we have agents with her as a precaution. She'll be home tomorrow. The SUV turned onto their street, and Jonathan noticed Malik, tensing as they approached their house. The events of the day had clearly shaken his sense of safety. It's okay, Jonathan reassured him. Our house is secure. There are agents checking it right now, and we'll have protection tonight. Sure enough, as they pulled into the driveway, they could see agents moving efficiently around their property, while others waited by the front door. One approached as Jonathan and Malik exited the vehicle. Sir, we've completed the sweep. We found and neutralized 3 listening devices, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one in your home office. The house is clear now. Thank you, Jonathan replied. Maintain the perimeter through the night. I want a guard on every entrance. Yes, sir. Inside, the house looked exactly as they had left it that morning, though Malik noticed small, telltale signs of the security sweep. a picture frame slightly askew, a book not quite back in its original position on the shelf. They were listening. "To us in our own house?" he asked, his voice small. Jonathan nodded grimly. "For how long? We don't know yet, but they can't do it anymore." He guided Malik upstairs. "Get ready for bed. It's been a long day." "I'm not sure I can sleep," Malik admitted. "Try," Jonathan said gently. "You're safe now, I promise." After Malik had changed and brushed his teeth, Jonathan sat on the edge of his bed, something he hadn't done since Malik was much younger. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more about my work," he said. "I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark." "It's okay," Malik replied. "I understand now." "No more secrets between us," Jonathan promised. "At least, not about the important things." As Malik drifted toward sleep, Jonathan remained seated beside him, his mind turning over the events of the day. The photograph from Syria troubled him deeply. It suggested a connection between the school operation and his past missions, a personal vendetta rather than just routine intelligence gathering. His phone vibrated with a message from Ramirez, O'Reilly talking. "Says he answers to someone named Volk." "Ring any bells?" Jonathan stared at the message, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Anton Volk, a name from the past, from the very mission depicted in the photograph, a mission that had ended with 5 enemy operatives dead and one who had escaped, wounded but alive. He typed back, "Yes, high priority. We'll brief in person tomorrow. Double the security detail at my house tonight." Setting his phone aside, Jonathan looked down at his sleeping son. The day's events had changed everything. The careful separation he'd maintained between his work and family life had been shattered, and now a ghost from his past threatened them both. One thing was certain: tomorrow would bring a reckoning. Dawn broke over the Carter household with the quiet efficiency of a military operation. Jonathan, who had barely slept, was already in his home office when his secure phone rang at 5:30 a.m. "Carter," he answered. "We have confirmation." Ramirez's voice came through. "Anton Volk is in the country. Facial recognition picked him up at a gas station in Maryland yesterday." "How the hell did he get into the country?" Jonathan demanded, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Malik. "Diplomatic cover. He entered as part of a trade delegation from Ukraine 3 weeks ago, then dropped off the grid." Jonathan absorbed this information, the pieces falling into place. "And the school operation?" "Looks like it was dual purpose," Ramirez replied. "The intelligence gathering was real, but according to O'Reilly, they had specific instructions regarding your son." "Abduction?" "Yes. They were supposed to take him during the confusion of the evacuation. Volk wants to use him as leverage." "Leverage for what?" There was a pause before Ramirez answered. "For you to turn over something called Blackfish files. Mean anything to you?" Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. The Blackfish operation had been one of the most classified missions he'd ever led. A successful infiltration of a Russian intelligence network that had yielded unprecedented insights into their operations. Volk had been part of that network. "I know what he wants," Jonathan confirmed. "Where's Volk now?" "We don't know. The Maryland sighting was 18 hours ago. He could be anywhere." "He's not anywhere," Jonathan said with certainty. "He's nearby. He wouldn't delegate this operation, not when it's personal. We've increased surveillance around your neighborhood and at Jefferson Academy. All targeted families have protection." "Details? Not good enough," Jonathan argued. "Volk is a ghost. He won't try conventional approaches now that his initial operation has been compromised." "What do you suggest?" Jonathan considered their options. "We need to draw him out. Use me as bait." "That's risky," Ramirez cautioned. "So is waiting for him to make the next move," Jonathan countered. "I'll come in and we'll work out the details." After ending the call, Jonathan went to check on Malik, who was still sleeping peacefully. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him more heavily than ever. His work had put his son in danger, and now he had to find a way to eliminate that threat permanently. Downstairs, he found one of the security agents making coffee in the kitchen. "Any activity overnight?" Jonathan asked. All quiet, sir, the agent reported. Perimeter is secure. Jonathan nodded, then stiffened as he noticed something through the kitchen window. A small red dot moving across the wall behind the agent. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground just as the window shattered, and a bullet embedded itself in the cabinet where the agent's head had been seconds before. "Sniper!" Jonathan shouted. "Get down!" More shots followed, precise and methodical, targeting the house's first-floor windows. From outside came the sound of the security team returning fire, shouting into their radios for backup. Jonathan crawled to the hallway. "Secure the upstairs. Malik's up there." Two agents raced up the stairs while Jonathan pulled his own weapon from the ankle holster he always wore. The barrage of gunfire continued, pinning them down inside the house. "Where are they firing from?" Jonathan demanded into the radio. "Rooftop across the street," came the terse reply. "East side. We can't get a clear shot." A panicked shout came from upstairs. "Sir, the boy's not in his room." Jonathan felt his blood turn to ice. What? His bed's empty, windows still locked from the inside. He must be somewhere in the house. Relief flooded through Jonathan, followed immediately by renewed concern. "Malik!" he called out. "Where are you?" "Dad?" Malik's frightened voice came from somewhere nearby. "I'm in the panic room." Jonathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The panic room, a reinforced closet off his home office that he'd installed years ago, but never expected to use. He'd shown it to Malik only once, explaining it was for emergencies. "Smart boy," Jonathan murmured. "Stay there," he called out. "Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." The gunfire had stopped, the sudden silence almost more unnerving than the chaos moments before. Jonathan's radio crackled. "Sir, the sniper's gone. Looks like it was a diversion." A diversion for what? Jonathan muttered, then realized with sudden clarity what was happening. "Check the back of the house, now!" Even as he gave the order, a tremendous crash came from the direction of the kitchen, followed by shouts and more gunfire. Jonathan sprinted toward the sound, weapon ready, to find two black-clad figures had crashed through the back door. One was already down, shot by the security team, but the other was exchanging fire from behind the kitchen island. "Folk is coming for Malik," Jonathan shouted to the nearest agent. "This is just the first wave. Get everyone inside the house." He fired two precise shots at the intruder, forcing him to retreat further into the kitchen. More agents poured in, from outside, surrounding the remaining attacker, who finally dropped his weapon in surrender. Jonathan didn't wait to see him taken into custody. He raced back toward his office and the panic room where Malik was hiding. As he approached, he heard a small, strangled cry from inside. "Malik!" he called urgently. "Are you okay?" There was no response. With growing dread, Jonathan entered the code to unlock the panic room door. As it swung open, his worst fears were confirmed. The room was empty, save for Malik's phone lying on the floor. And on the wall, written in what looked like red marker, was a message. "The boy for the files. You have 4 hours. Instructions to follow." Jonathan stared at the message, unable to process for a moment how this could have happened. The panic room was supposed to be impenetrable from the outside, unless they didn't break in, he realized aloud. They were already inside. The listening devices found yesterday hadn't been the only breach of their home. Somehow, people had gained access to the panic room itself, learning its location and override codes. Ramirez arrived 20 minutes later to find a house in chaos. Agents securing the perimeter, forensic teams processing evidence, and Jonathan Carter, usually the calmest person in any crisis, pacing his office like a caged animal. "How did they get him?" she demanded without preamble. "Hidden entrance to the panic room through the basement," Jonathan replied tersely. "Maintenance tunnel that wasn't on the original house plans. They've been planning this for months." "How did they get past the security team?" "Distraction," Jonathan said. "The sniper, the front assault, it was all to draw our attention while someone already inside the house took Malik." Ramirez surveyed the damage. "We'll get him back," she promised. "Yes, we will," Jonathan agreed, his voice cold with determination. "But not their way. I'm not waiting for their instructions." "What do you mean?" Jonathan retrieved his laptop, opening a secure program. Every agent has a tracking chip embedded in their gear. My son's watch, the one I gave him last Christmas, has one too. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anyone. You put a tracker on your own son? Ramirez asked, surprised. Precaution, Jonathan replied without apology, and now it might save his life. The program completed its search, displaying a blinking dot on a map. He's moving, Jonathan observed. Heading east on the highway. They haven't found the tracker yet. I'll mobilize a tactical team, Ramirez said, reaching for her phone. No, Jonathan stopped her. Too many people, too much chance of Volk spotting the operation. This needs to be small and precise. You can't go in alone, Ramirez argued. Not alone, Jonathan agreed. I need a driver, a sniper, and someone to handle communications, that's it. This is against protocol, Ramirez warned. If anything goes wrong. My son is in the hands of a man who has every reason to want me to suffer, Jonathan cut her off. Protocol isn't going to save Malik. I am. After a tense moment, Ramirez nodded. Okay, I'll drive. Williams can handle comms and Jackson is our best sniper. Good, we leave in 5 minutes. As they prepared to depart, Jonathan's secure phone buzzed with a message. Files for the boy. Delaware Warehouse District. Building 17. Come alone. They've made contact, he told Ramirez, showing her the message. Delaware matches the tracker's direction, she confirmed. But this feels like a trap. Of course it's a trap, Jonathan agreed. But now we know exactly where they're taking him, and they don't know we know. The 4-person team moved with practiced efficiency, loading gear into an unmarked SUV. Jonathan checked his weapons one last time, his mind replaying the Syrian mission where he had first encountered Anton Volk. The man had been ruthless then, a skilled operative with a sadistic streak. Jonathan had shot him during their final confrontation, but Volk had managed to escape. Now, 5 years later, Volk had brought their unfinished business to American soil, and worse, had dragged Malik into it. As they pulled away from the house, Jonathan made a silent vow. By day's end, only one of them would still be standing, and for Malik's sake, it had to be him. The warehouse district in Delaware was a maze of abandoned buildings and crumbling infrastructure. Once a thriving industrial center, it had fallen into disrepair over the decades, creating the perfect setting for clandestine operations. Building 17 stood at the far edge of the complex, a massive concrete structure with broken windows and rusted metal doors. From their vantage point a quarter-mile away, Jonathan surveyed the warehouse through high-powered binoculars. The tracker showed Malik was inside, his signal stationary for the past 30 minutes. 2 guards at the main entrance, Jonathan noted. Another on the roof, probably more inside. Agent Jackson, positioned with his sniper rifle on an adjacent rooftop, confirmed through their secure comms. I count 5 hostiles total on exterior patrol, standard rotation pattern, fairly disciplined. Professional operators, Jonathan acknowledged, not just hired muscle. Ramirez checked her watch. We've got just under 2 hours before their deadline. What's the plan? Jonathan studied the building's layout on his tablet. Volk will expect me to come through the front with the files trying to make the exchange. We're going to disappoint him. He pointed to a maintenance tunnel indicated on the old building plans. This service access runs beneath the entire complex. Most likely they haven't secured it, since it's not on recent maps. And if they have? Ramirez asked. Then we adapt, Jonathan replied simply. Jackson stays on overwatch. You take the east side. I'll go in through the tunnel. Williams maintains communications and coordinates our movements. You sure about going in alone? Ramirez questioned. Jonathan nodded, his expression grim. Volk wants me. He'll be focused on watching for my approach. That gives us the advantage. They synchronized their watches and radio frequencies. As Jonathan prepared to move toward the tunnel entrance, Ramirez caught his arm. Carter, she said quietly. We get the boy out first. Volk is secondary. Understood, Jonathan agreed, though something in his eyes suggested Volk wouldn't be escaping this encounter. The tunnel entrance was concealed behind years of overgrowth and debris, exactly as the plans had indicated. Jonathan moved silently. Through the darkness, his tactical light illuminating just enough to navigate without giving away his position. The air was thick with dust and the musty smell of decay. Above him, Jackson's voice came through his earpiece. Movement at the east entrance, vehicle approaching. Description? Jonathan asked, pausing. Black sedan, 2 occupants. Looks like they're expected. Guards are waving them through. More players joining the party, Ramirez commented from her position. Could complicate things. Jonathan continued forward, reaching a junction where the tunnel split into 3 directions. The tracker indicated Malik was directly above the rightmost path. I'm underneath the main floor, he reported quietly, moving to find access point. The tunnel eventually led to a rusted ladder that ascended to what appeared to be a utility closet. Jonathan climbed carefully, listening for any sound of movement above. Reaching the top, he tested the hatch. Locked from the outside, as expected. With practiced efficiency, he attached a small breaching charge to the lock mechanism. The device was designed for minimal noise, a contained implosion rather than explosion. He triggered it and waited for the soft thump before pushing the hatch open. The utility closet was empty, filled with abandoned cleaning supplies and broken equipment. Jonathan emerged silently, drawing his weapon as he moved to the door. I'm inside, he whispered into his comms. Status? All quiet outside, Jackson reported. Wait, I see movement in the second-floor office windows. Looks like, yes, confirmed visual on a child matching Malik's description. Second floor, northwest corner office. 2 guards with him. Jonathan's heart raced at the confirmation that his son was alive, but he maintained his professional calm. Acknowledged, moving to second floor. The warehouse interior was cavernous, with a central floor space surrounded by offices and walkways on the second level. From his position, Jonathan could see armed men patrolling the main floor, 4 in total, plus the 2 with Malik upstairs. Jackson, do you have eyes on Volk? He asked. Negative. He must be inside, but I haven't spotted him yet. Jonathan assessed the situation. The stairs to the second floor were exposed, offering no cover. He'd be spotted immediately if he tried to use them. Instead, he noticed a freight elevator on the far wall. Changing approach, he informed the team. Using the freight elevator shaft to access second level. He moved along the periphery of the warehouse, staying in the shadows, until he reached the elevator. The car was stuck between floors, but the shaft offered a direct route upward. Jonathan pried open the doors just enough to slip through, then began climbing the service ladder built into the shaft wall. Reaching the second floor, he paused to listen before opening the doors a crack. The hallway outside was empty, but he could hear voices coming from around the corner, one deep and accented unmistakably Anton Volk. Your father should be arriving soon, the voice was saying. For your sake, I hope he brings what I asked for. My dad's going to make you sorry you ever touched me, came Malik's reply, his voice shaky but defiant. The sound of his son's voice, frightened but unbroken, filled Jonathan with both pride and renewed determination. He slipped out of the elevator shaft and moved silently down the hallway following the voices. Jackson, he whispered. On my mark, I need a distraction. East side, something loud. Roger that, the sniper confirmed. Ready when you are. Jonathan positioned himself outside the office where Malik was being held. Through the partially open door, he could see one guard standing near the window. The other must be behind the door, and Volk himself was speaking to Malik, though Jonathan couldn't see him from this angle. Ramirez, are you in position to enter? Jonathan asked quietly. Affirmative. East entrance is minimally guarded now. I can breach on your signal. Good. Everyone ready. Mark. From outside came the sound of an explosion as Jackson detonated a small charge he'd placed on an abandoned vehicle. Immediately, shouts erupted throughout the warehouse as guards responded to the perceived threat. Jonathan used the distraction to burst through the door, taking down the first guard with a silent, precise shot before the man could react. The second guard turned, raising his weapon, but Jonathan was faster, dropping him with 2 shots to the chest. Anton Volk stood behind an old desk, his hand gripping Malik's shoulder. He hadn't changed much in 5 years, still tall and imposing, with close-cropped silver hair and cold blue eyes. The only difference was the scar that ran along the left side of his face, a souvenir from their last encounter. "Carter," Volk said, his accent thick, but his English perfect. "Right on time. Did you bring my files?" Jonathan kept his weapon trained on Volk, his eyes quickly assessing Malik for injuries. His son appeared physically unharmed, though his eyes were wide with fear. "Let him go, Volk," Jonathan ordered. "This is between you and me." Volk smiled coldly. "Nothing is just between you and me anymore, not after what you did." He tightened his grip on Malik's shoulder, making the boy wince. "The files, Carter, or shall we see how many fingers your son can lose before you cooperate?" From his earpiece, Jonathan heard Ramirez's voice. "I'm inside. First floor clear, moving to your position." Jonathan needed to keep Volk talking. "The files weren't worth this, Anton. You crossed a line bringing my family into this." "You crossed the line first," Volk snarled, his composure cracking. "Your Blackfish operation destroyed everything I spent decades building. My network, my reputation, my future, all gone because of you." "That was the job," Jonathan replied evenly. "Nothing personal." "This is personal now," Volk countered, producing a knife and holding it near Malik's face. "The files, Carter. Final warning." Jonathan slowly reached into his jacket, as if retrieving something. The movement drew Volk's attention just enough for Malik to see his father's subtle nod, a signal they had practiced years ago in their backyard self-defense lessons. In one fluid motion, Malik drove his elbow backward into Volk's stomach, while simultaneously dropping to the floor. The distraction was all Jonathan needed. He fired once, the bullet striking Volk in the shoulder of his knife hand. Volk stumbled backward, dropping the knife but reaching for a gun at his waist. Before he could draw it, Ramirez appeared in the doorway behind him, her weapon leveled at his back. "Federal agent, don't move!" Cornered and wounded, Volk froze, his eyes locked with Jonathan's in a final moment of defiance. "It's over, Anton," Jonathan said, moving forward to pull Malik safely behind him. "For now," Volk replied with a grim smile. "But there will be others. Men like me don't just disappear." "You're right," Jonathan agreed as Ramirez secured Volk's hands behind his back. "They go to maximum security facilities where they're forgotten." With Volk restrained, Jonathan finally turned his full attention to Malik, kneeling down to his son's level. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Malik shook his head, then threw his arms around his father's neck. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. "I remembered what you taught me. Look for an opportunity and be ready." Jonathan held his son tightly, the professional operative giving way to the father for a brief, precious moment. "You did perfectly," he assured Malik. "I'm so proud of you." Ramirez's voice interrupted their reunion. "We need to move. There could be more hostiles in the area." Jonathan nodded, keeping one arm protectively around Malik as they moved toward the exit. The operation had been successful, but he knew the danger wasn't entirely past. Volk had resources, connections. This would have repercussions. But for now, Malik was safe. That was all that mattered. The media covered the incident extensively, though most of the details remained classified. Headlines across the country read, "Pentagon official thwarts major security breach at D.C. private school," and "Foiled kidnapping plot linked to foreign intelligence operation." Jonathan declined all interviews, despite multiple networks offering primetime slots. His only public statement was brief and understated. "I just did what any father would do." 3 days after the warehouse raid, life was beginning to return to a semblance of normalcy. The Carter house had new, enhanced security systems, and while the protective detail remained, it was more discreet now. Malik's mother had returned from Chicago, horrified by what had happened but relieved to find her family safe. "Will I be going back to Jefferson Academy?" Malik asked over breakfast, his first mention of school since the incident. Jonathan and his wife exchanged glances. "Do you want to?" his mother asked gently. Malik considered the question seriously. "I think so. I don't want them to think I'm scared." Jonathan nodded, respecting his son's courage. "If that's what you want, then yes. But there will be changes." Indeed, Jefferson Academy had already initiated significant changes. Principal Hayes, shaken by the events and the security vulnerabilities exposed, had implemented a complete overhaul of the school's security protocols. More importantly, he had announced a comprehensive review of the school's culture and inclusivity practices. Ms. Anderson, surprisingly, had been at the forefront of these efforts. The day after the incident, she had requested a meeting with Principal Hayes to formally acknowledge her biased treatment of Malik and other students from diverse backgrounds. Whether motivated by genuine remorse or fear for her job, she had become an unlikely advocate for change. When Malik returned to school the following week, accompanied by an undercover security detail at Jonathan's insistence, he found his status had shifted dramatically. No longer the outsider whose claims were doubted, he was now the center of fascinated respect. Even Tyler Whitman, who had once mocked him mercilessly, approached with awkward attempts at friendship. "My dad says your dad is like super important," Tyler said during lunch period. "That he's a hero or something." Malik shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "He's just my dad." Ethan, still his loyal friend, rolled his eyes at Tyler's obvious change in attitude. "Where was all this respect when you were making fun of him?" Tyler had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yeah, well, sorry about that." As the boys continued their lunch, Ms. Anderson approached their table cautiously. The confident, slightly smug teacher was gone, replaced by someone more humble and uncertain. "Malik," she said, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Malik glanced at Ethan, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Okay," he agreed, following her to a quiet corner of the cafeteria. "I wanted to apologize again," Ms. Anderson began, her voice sincere. "What I did was wrong. I made assumptions about you and your family that weren't just incorrect. They were hurtful and prejudiced." Malik studied his teacher's face, searching for the condescension he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he found what appeared to be genuine remorse. "It's okay," he said finally, though they both knew it wasn't entirely okay. Not yet. "No, it's not," Ms. Anderson insisted. "But I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. I've asked Principal Hayes to arrange for diversity training for all faculty, and I'm participating in a mentorship program for students from underrepresented backgrounds." Malik nodded, not quite ready to fully forgive, but appreciating the effort. "That sounds good." "And," Ms. Anderson added, "I've started a new class project about assumptions and bias. Would you be willing to share your experience with the class? Only if you're comfortable, of course." The request surprised Malik. A month ago, Ms. Anderson would never have given him such a platform. "I'll think about it," he promised. As he returned to his lunch table, Malik felt something he hadn't experienced at Jefferson Academy before, a sense of belonging. Not because his father had turned out to be important, but because he was finally being seen for himself. After school, Jonathan was waiting in the car, as he had been every day since the incident. The routine check-in had become their new normal. "How was school?" Jonathan asked as Malik climbed into the passenger seat. "Good," Malik replied. "Ms. Anderson wants me to talk to the class about assumptions and bias." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Quite a change from a week ago." "Yeah," Malik agreed. "I think she's actually trying to be better." As they drove home, Malik noticed the black SUV following at a discreet distance, not a threatening presence anymore, but a reassuring one. "Dad," he asked suddenly, "is Volk really gone for good?" Jonathan glanced at his son, considering how much truth to share. Their recent experiences had proven that sheltering Malik completely hadn't protected him. But neither did he want to burden a 10-year-old with unnecessary fears. "He's in federal custody," Jonathan said carefully. "He'll be there for a very long time." Malik nodded, processing this. "But there are others like him, aren't there? That's why we still have security." "Yes," Jonathan admitted. "My work creates enemies sometimes, but the security is mostly precautionary. Now, you don't need to worry." "I'm not worried," Malik said with surprising confidence. "I know what to do now if something happens, and I know you'll always come for me." Jonathan felt a complex mixture of pride and sadness at his son's words. No child should have to think about such things, yet Malik was handling it with remarkable resilience. "Always," Jonathan confirmed. That's a promise. 2 months after the warehouse incident, Jefferson Academy was hosting its annual spring showcase, an event where students presented projects and performances for parents and the community. In previous years, Malik had participated minimally, keeping to the background. This year was different. Inspired by his experiences, Malik had created a presentation titled, "Beyond Appearances, Challenging Our Assumptions." Ms. Anderson, true to her word about changing, had enthusiastically supported the project, providing resources and guidance while allowing Malik to take the lead. The gymnasium was packed with parents, teachers, and students moving between display booths. Jonathan and his wife stood proudly watching as Malik confidently explained his project to visitors. "The point isn't that assumptions are always wrong," Malik was saying to an attentive group. "It's that they limit our understanding if we don't challenge them, like assuming someone couldn't have a certain job because of how they look." Principal Hayes approached the Carters, extending his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, it's wonderful to see you both. Malik's project is quite impressive." "Yes, it is," Jonathan agreed, shaking the principal's hand. "He's put a lot of thought into it. We've implemented many changes since the incident," Hayes continued. "New security protocols, of course, but also programs to address bias and create a more inclusive environment. Malik has been instrumental in helping us understand where we fell short." From across the room, they spotted Ms. Anderson speaking with another group of parents. Noticing the Carters, she excused herself and walked over. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," she greeted them, her manner respectful but no longer nervous. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" Jonathan asked, curious. "For not pursuing action against me or the school," she replied candidly. "You would have been justified given how I treated Malik. Instead, you gave us the opportunity to learn and improve." Jonathan studied the teacher who had once mocked his son. The change in her seemed genuine, though he knew such transformations rarely happened overnight. "Everyone deserves a chance to do better," he said simply. As the showcase continued, Ethan joined Malik at his presentation booth. The two boys had grown even closer through their shared experience. Moreover, Jonathan had quietly arranged for Ethan's father to secure a position with a government contractor, a job that utilized his factory skills while providing better pay and stability. "Your presentation is the best one here," Ethan told Malik. "Even Tyler said so." Malik grinned. "Tyler's just being nice because he's still scared of my dad." "Smart kid," Ethan laughed. Later that evening, as families began to depart, Malik was surprised to see Agent Ramirez enter the gymnasium, dressed in civilian clothes, but still unmistakable with her observant gaze and purposeful stride. She approached the Carter family, nodding to Jonathan before turning to Malik. "Impressive project," she said. "You've got a good head on your shoulders." "Thanks," Malik replied, pleased by the compliment from someone he now knew was a respected FBI agent. "Mr. Carter," Ramirez continued, turning to Jonathan, "I thought you'd want to know. The information we recovered from Volk's operation has led to the identification of a leak within our intelligence community. They're being dealt with." Jonathan nodded, understanding the significance. "Good. Any other loose ends?" "None that should concern your family," Ramirez assured him. "The threat assessment has been downgraded. You can start thinking about reducing the security detail soon." It was welcome news, though Jonathan knew they would never return to the same level of anonymity they'd had before. Some changes were permanent. As they drove home that night, Malik stared out the window at the familiar streets of their neighborhood. The black SUV was still there, trailing at a respectful distance, but Malik knew it wouldn't be their constant companion much longer. "Dad," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up." "Oh?" Jonathan glanced at his son. "What's that?" "I want to work in cybersecurity," Malik announced, "to protect people like you do." Jonathan felt a complex surge of emotions, pride mingled with concern. His work had put his family in danger, yet his son saw only the purpose behind it. "That's a worthy goal," he said carefully, "but you've got plenty of time to decide. Don't rush into following my footsteps just because of what happened. It's not just because of that, Malik insisted. I'm good with computers, and I understand now why what you do is important. From the back seat, Malik's mother leaned forward. If that's what you want, you'll be better than your dad, she teased, because you'll start young. Jonathan smiled at his wife in the rearview mirror, grateful for her support even after all their family had endured. When they arrived home, the familiar sight of their house, now equipped with enhanced security systems, greeted them. As they walked inside, Malik paused, looking back at the black SUV parked discreetly down the street. Are they still watching us? He asked. Jonathan followed his gaze. For now, but not for much longer. That night, after Malik had gone to bed, Jonathan sat in his home office, reviewing the final security reports from Folk's capture. The operation had exposed vulnerabilities not just in the school, but in how his own family had been protected. Lessons had been learned, adjustments made. His phone rang, a secure line that only a handful of people had access to. The caller ID showed it was from the White House. Carter, he answered. Mr. Carter, the president would like to meet with you tomorrow morning, the voice on the other end informed him, regarding the Volk situation and its implications for national security. I'll be there, Jonathan confirmed. After ending the call, he sat quietly for a moment, considering how to use this opportunity. The president would expect a full briefing on the foreign intelligence threat, but Jonathan had another agenda as well, securing additional funding for school security nationwide. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Malik stood there in pajamas, looking suddenly younger than his 10 years. Everything okay? Jonathan asked. Malik nodded. Just wanted to say goodnight again. Jonathan smiled, recognizing the excuse for what it was, his son's way of checking, that his father was still there, still safe. The trauma of recent events would take time to fade. Come here, Jonathan said, opening his arms. Malik crossed the room and accepted the embrace, holding on a moment longer than usual. Dad, are we really going to be okay now? Yes, Jonathan assured him, with the conviction of a promise he would move heaven and earth to keep. We're going to be more than okay. As Malik returned to bed, Jonathan turned off his computer and followed, pausing in the hallway to check the security system, a habit he would likely never break. Outside, the black SUV remained on watch, its presence a reminder of dangers faced and overcome. The Carter family had been tested in ways few families ever experience. They had faced fear, separation, and violence. But they had emerged stronger, with a deeper understanding of each other and the world they inhabited. In his room, Malik looked out his window at the night sky, thinking about his presentation, his father's work, and the future that stretched before him. He whispered to himself, "They doubted me. They doubted my dad. They won't do it again." And in that simple truth, he found peace enough to sleep. But before you go, tell us in the comments, how often do we dismiss someone's truth because it doesn't fit the box we've placed them in? The greatest heroes rarely announce themselves. They simply show up when needed most. If Malik's story moved you, leave a like and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge our assumptions. Sometimes vindication comes with a price none of us expect to pay.